Good day, everyone, and welcome to the latest Getting More Out of vRealize Operations series. Today is going to be focused on the vRealize Operations for Horizon solution, and we're going to be walking you through how to quickly operationalize this product once you have it up and running in your environment. My name is Cameron Four, and I am a staff systems engineer here at VMware. I work on our end-user computing team. And I work with other customers just like yourself all around the country trying to help them get acquainted with this solution so they get the most value out of it as quickly as possible and get deep insight into really what's going on from a performance perspective throughout the environment. So looking at today's agenda, first thing we want to do is make sure everyone has a baseline understanding of the solution. So we're going to help you understand concepts such as health, risk, and efficiency. And then we will transition into understanding proactive alerting and how the alerting capabilities in the solution can actually give you good visibility from a proactive perspective into issues that are impacting the users in your environment. We will also walk you through the end user experience dashboard, how to use it, how to consume it, and how it really provides you end-to-end visibility into, again, performance concerns that are impacting your users' perspective of their desktop performance. And then we will walk you through a troubleshooting scenario leveraging the latest Horizon Help Desk dashboard. And we'll basically demonstrate for you guys today how quickly it can help you identify individual user session issues and what's contributing to that whole perception, why is my desktop slow? So we'll definitely be going over that today. And then finally, we'll wrap everything up. We'll kind of conclude and kind of hit the highlights of everything that we've walked through and everything that we talked through today. And then we'll switch over to live Q&A so you guys can ask the questions that you need to ask, and we'll do our best to get those things answered today. So with that agenda, let me transition over to our demo environment here. And I hope everyone on today's webinar can see my dashboard I have up and running. So where we are right now, we're actually on the default recommendations dashboard that's included out of box for Horizon here, or vROPs for Horizon. And we see terms like health, risk, and efficiency. And really what these terms are all about are really giving a clue is how is your environment running, right? But the terms have different meanings, right? So from a health perspective, these are things like, how hard is my data store working? Is it running at max capacity? Or, do I have an entire ESX cluster that's running near CPU or memory capacity, right? So health can be performance-related concerns, right? But there are also more environmental concerns, such as, well, do I have redundant paths that are down to a data store in my environment, right? Or do I have a NIC that's dropping packets to and from my servers and their switches? Right, so it can look at both. It can look at everything from, hey, there's a memory dim on one of my hosts, and it's giving me warnings saying that there's an issue, right? So health are really immediate things that we want to pay attention to. They are things that are real. These are not fake problems, right? We are showing you what's going on in your environment, and we're telling you, hey, you need to go pay attention to these things. So health is definitely immediate concerns or things that you really need to pay attention to throughout the environment. Now, risk is a little bit more future looking. So risk is looking at things mostly in terms of capacity utilization. So, when am I expected to run out of data store capacity for a particular data store? Is it going to be weeks, months? Is it very near? And it basically increases your risk factor depending on how near of a term you're about to run out of that capacity, right? So it doesn't have to be a data store, right? It could be server capacity, cluster capacity. It really depends on the object that you're monitoring. And in this case, we can see even on the screen here that we have some virtual machines that are consuming a high lot of CPU utilization. But risk is, again, it's usually more future looking, not quite as immediate as your health concerns typically are, but they can be directly impacting health if you're, for example, going to run out of capacity in the near term. Now, efficiency is really looking for areas of optimization. Right, so after we've taken care of health problems, we've looked at their risk and analyzed capacity concerns. Efficiencies are where we can go back and reclaim resources, right? Do we have, users or virtual desktops with way too many provision resources, or maybe you have that application owner who they basically requested way too many virtual CPUs, way too much memory. vRealize Operations has the ability to learn that. It learns what your environment needs to consume to run efficiently, and it can give you a score around those types of environmental things, so you can actually go reclaim the resources that people aren't consuming. Um, so outside of that, that's really where health, risk, and efficiency come into play. Also notice the icons here, right? So the health is always typically identified with, a cross-shaped type item. Risk is more of a star shape, pentagon shape, and then efficiency is more of this green wave. So as you see those icons throughout today's demonstration, that's really what they mean. So they kind of give you a quick indication of what type of alert you're seeing there. And it also kind of lends to the notion of, well, is this a health problem, risk, efficiency, right? So that's just keep that in mind as we go throughout today's conversation. The next thing I want to share everyone is the alerting capability. So we did discuss that vRealize operations for Horizon has the ability to proactively alert me when there are performance issues going on impacting my users' perspective of their experience of their desktop. So what am I talking about? So the first thing that we see here from a learning perspective, we see alerts like virtual machine CPU performance degraded or virtual machine disk performance degraded. So these are actually specific Horizon or vROPs for Horizon alerts that are imported into the product. So once you integrate this into your Horizon environment, we're going to start to monitor all of your active sessions, right? So as users log into desktops, those desktops are being consumed. We're going to monitor their CPU performance. And we don't just look at it from a utilization perspective. Utilization is interesting, right? Are they out of CPU, are they out of memory? That's all fine. But that doesn't tell us necessarily that something is wrong. So what we actually do is we have various symptoms that we track, and these symptoms are based on our best practices of what we know that impacts a user's experience throughout a virtualization environment. And then we alert on them very proactively for you, and we'll kind of walk you through how this particular tool alerts on some of those symptoms that we care about. The other thing I really want to show you around how vRealize operation does alerting, because I think it's a big differentiator here. One of the key things that it does is, instead of showing you individual alerts for every alarm bell that gets tripped in the data center, vRealize operations actually gives you alert categories. So in this case, you can see again we have this virtual machine CPU performance degraded. And that's the impact. That's the category impact of the problem going on. But instead of me seeing this as an individual item, we can see that it's actually impacting 12 individual objects. So again, instead of 12 alerts, seeing them individually, maybe they're scattered throughout the day, and it would be really hard for me to determine when these alerts happened and what's the overall size and scope. We're trying to give you both in one single context, right? Here's the problem that we're seeing, and this is how big it is. This is how many people are being impacted by this type of alert. So that's very valuable to a lot of customers who are monitoring virtual desktop environments. Now, if I want to find out more information about this alert, why is this going on, I simply click into it. Right, so I click on the alerts and I can see all of the individual virtual machines that have been impacted by CPU performance degraded, right? Now we still don't know why just yet. We're still digging into that, but we can see again the virtual machines. We can see when the alert was created, and we can also see last time it was updated. Right, so all of this information is very useful in determining, is this something that's immediate? Has this been going on a long time? And when is the last time we got information out of that virtual desktop? Right, so all of that is determined pretty quickly with a solution like this. Now, if I want to drill into an individual desktop and determine, well, okay, why are we saying the CPU performance is degraded? I simply click on the alert, and now I can actually see the various symptoms that are tracking or trending with this particular problem. So again, one of the other capabilities that, again, I think is a nice way that vROPs presents this is that, again, we're not just alerting on a single symptom. So a symptom could be, CPU utilization is high, or in this case, we see that CPU ready time is greater than 7%. Now, the good thing here is, you don't have to know that CPU ready time greater than 7% is bad. We're telling you it's bad, right? We are directly saying, hey, Mr. Customer, this is a symptom that is impacting the performance of your user's perspective of their desktop, and we're showing it to you right here. But in addition to that particular symptom, we're also tracking, it looks like another symptom. And in this case, the secondary symptom is CPU contention is high. It's greater than 15%. In fact, we can see the score that's currently measuring. It's 15.4 at the moment, so just beyond what we've considered a intermediate threshold. We can also see non-triggered symptoms. So the symptoms that aren't triggered, well, we have another one that says, once it gets to a 20% contention rate, make that a critical alert. So the value here is that we have the ability to show or track multiple symptoms that all contribute to one type of alert category. And that's very valuable for helping our customers determine, well, not just that there's a problem, okay, great, there's a problem, but what could be contributing to the problem. So the more symptoms I can track around these issues, the more easily I can determine, well, why might I be seeing this type of problem? So in this case, we see that we're triggering both CPU ready time and contention, right? So that's very important. Now, in addition to the ability to track multiple symptoms, we also can provide you recommendations. So not just tell you there's a problem, tell you what type of problem it is, but what do I go do, okay? Because you never know who the user is that's going to be getting the alert, and we have to make sure that whoever it is can consume the alert and has an action item. Now, we provide default recommendations out of the box, but in certain situations, you might need to add in your own recommendations. Maybe the VDI admin that's looking at this, he might not be able to interact with the server infrastructure, so he might have to go to a different team. So his recommendation might be, go engage the server infrastructure team and provide them this information so they can begin analysis. Right? That might be the recommendation or action item that they go execute on. So in addition to triggering the symptoms, you can also expand each one. You can kind of see how long the symptoms have been going on. So it does provide you a chart. And again, you can kind of see when the thresholds have been triggered over time. And again, it's just a very valuable way to get metrics out of your Horizon View environments and do it again, proactively, right? We didn't have to wait for these alerts. We simply logged in. We looked at the default recommendations dashboard, and it told us, hey, we have stuff going on in our environment right now we need to go pay attention to. All right, so now I'm going to get out of the alert that I tracked into. And next thing I want to do is I want to transition over to the end user experience dashboard. Let's have it load real quickly. So as we've been discussing, there are various symptoms that we track from an alerting perspective proactively to kind of alert you when these things are going on that could be impacting your users. And most of these symptoms are going to track around 4 key metrics. The first one's going to be CPU experience, right? Now in CPU, we've already discussed concepts like CPU ready time, CPU contention. We didn't necessarily go into details around them. I can spend a little bit of time on that. But we also look at things like virtual disk experience, right? And really the key metric there is latency. We also have other metrics. We can look at the IOPS that the virtual machines are driving. But really, if I want to know, how the individual virtual machines are performing in the environment, what is their perspective of their disk, not just how much performance are they driving. I really need to know, is the underlying infrastructure adequately meeting their needs? And we try to do it in a very simple manner. And we do it in 2 ways, really. One of those is through these heat maps. So we have very colorful heat maps here that basically tell you from a color perspective, is the experience good or is the metric bad? And again, you don't necessarily have to know what the metrics are. We provide you a color scale and you can actually see what numbers we're using to drive these colors. But the reality is we try to keep it very simple. Green is good, red is bad, and there's various color stages in between. But again, looking at it this way, it helps you to easily see how large the problems are in your environment. Do we have entire desktop pools where they're experiencing bad CPU ready time or poor CPU performance? Or do we have entire pools where their disk latency is extremely high and that's also impacting their experience? And of course, in our demo environment, thankfully, we actually see a lot of these things. Now, obviously, in a production level customer environment, you'd want this to be all green. But in our demo environment, to really show you the ability of the tool, thankfully, it's not so optimized, right? There's a lot of room for improvements that we can make, and we can see them visually, right? So we have CPU performance issues, we have disk latency issues. Now, I told you we're showing you these in 2 ways. So again, one of them is the heat map, and the other one is, again, we're also showing you all of the alerts coming out of these particular desktops. So as you see here, there's a title called active session alerts, and these active session alerts are basically showing us for all the VMs that are actually logged in, here's the number. You have 9 people being impacted by disk performance issue. You have 8 people being impacted by CPU performance issue. And of course, there are another other number of other issues that are going on in the environment, but it orders it from critical first, and depending how large or number of alerts you're actually having on a particular item. So again, it's all very straightforward, all very visual, so you can see how big these issues are and quickly determine, why users might be calling in and complaining that, hey, my performance is pretty slow in the environment. Now, a couple of things I did want to point out here is, the reason why we look at these things from a virtual machine perspective first. So this one says, VM CPU ready time, is we look at it from the VM's perspective because it's much more granular, right? So if we look at it from the host perspective of CPU ready time, or the host average perspective of CPU contention, might be much lower than what the individual desktop's average number is. So by looking at the virtual machine first, we're basically guaranteeing we see these hotspots in the environment. We can see how users are being impacted by a performance problem on their session, not just, is my entire server down? So yes, it's definitely good to know that issues are, impacting my server, but it's also good to know that I have issues impacting my user's individual virtual machine, right? Because I might have a data store that's perfectly performing well from a disk latency perspective. The overall average latency might be fine, right? It might be in the green range. But if I only looked at the data store, I would never see the hot-spotted virtual machines that are individually having disk latency problems, and never know that, hey, while the overall latency is fine, it's still not adequately serving up the intensity or the performance of IOs that these individual sessions are requiring. Right. So again, it's always important to start the VM first, particularly in a VDI environment, and then sort of expand out to the larger infrastructure, which we can definitely do. So in this case, all of these heat map widgets are changeable. So again, we can see the virtual machine CPU ready time, but maybe we want excuse me, measure it by CPU contention. So I can change it. Look at, okay, well, what's the overall contention environment? Well, the contention looks a lot lower than ready time, right? So these things are all clues and just all providing me more information into what's going on. Maybe I want to look at virtual machine CPU utilization, right? And we can see there's only one guy really driving really high CPU time, but again, I can see it visually. I didn't have to spend a lot of time trying to find this information. And of course, we can also look at it from the host perspective. So if we want to see the host CPU contention, again, we can see from the host average number, that CPU contention score is much lower, right? So again, if we only looked at the host, we wouldn't really see these virtual machines having the performance issues that they're having. And then finally, of course, host CPU utilization. We can see that utilization, see that score. Do I have any hosts that are being hotspotted? All of it just a matter of clicks. Now, one of the reasons we look at CPU ready time is CPU ready time is it's one of those scores that measures, how long is my virtual machine waiting to schedule time with the hypervisor, right? So it's almost like disk latency, right? The virtual machine that's made the disk request, latency is the measurement of, well, how long is it having to wait for that request to be honored? Well, CPU ready time is the exact same thing, but it's for the virtual machine's processing, right? So the processor needs to schedule time with the hypervisor. There's a measurement of how long that waits to execute. And once it goes above a certain threshold, I need to know that that's happening, because it will begin to start to impact the user's perspective of their CPU performance. So things like launching Word takes longer, or seeing videos might get slowed down because of poor CPU performance. These are just various things that can kind of contribute to the overall user's perspective of, why is their desktop slow. Now we can also see the relationship of these items. So again, without having to go anywhere, I select a troubled virtual machine, I click on it, it quickly shows me the relationship. I can see the virtual machine and where the problem's coming in. Well, it's red, right? So red means bad, right? And again, I don't necessarily need to know what the exact answer is at the moment, but I do see there is a problem coming out of the virtual machine world. Now I can also see the data stores that are attached. So vROPs is a very powerful correlation engine, right? It takes the idea of a user, associates it with the desktop, to a desktop pool, to a host, that user to their data store. And again, in one snapshot, we can see all of the tiers that are around that desktop session. And we can look at and see, well, are any of those other tiers having problems? So, and again, the idea is for a quicker remediation, right? So if I can see the user's having a performance problem and oh, by the way, here's his host, if that was also red, I would know that his host is having issues as well. And I could spend more time looking into what issues his host is having and determining, is there a larger issue going on there? Now we can also chart out information. Maybe we want to know how long these alerts have been going on. So in this case, we can see that this performance issue has been going up for some time, but I also have the ability to change my date and time control. So here I can click on the calendar. I could choose last hour, last 6 hours, last 24 hours, or even the last month, just to see, hey, how many times or how frequently does this issue happen without a given month, right? So you have the ability to chart this pretty quickly. Now, the other thing we can do is we can also add in additional machines, right? So in this case, I can add in the virtual machine right next to him and have both of them in the exact same charting window. And if I want to see if these issues are actually trending with one another, well, I can just simply choose to unsplit the charts, stack them together, and see if their CPU ready time is actually trending along with one another. Maybe they're on the same host. Maybe they're both having CPU performance issues, and I need to go spend more time with the infrastructure folks to determine why this might be. And again, we can see this all within just a matter of clicks. We didn't really have to spend a lot of time getting to this. And of course, all of these heat maps work for the same. So even from a disk perspective, right, we can click on an individual virtual machine. We can see its disk latency. We can see, are any of the data stores having significant problems, or is it really just the virtual machine's underlying disk having the issues, the host having a disk problem, all of that within one click. Now, in addition to some of the vCenter specific metrics, right, that's really the CPU, disk, and VRAM metrics that are coming out of this dashboard, we also get very good visibility into PC over IP experience. And this is probably one of the most important metrics you can have in a VDI environment, right, because this actually gives you the ability to measure the performance or quality of service of the user's connection from their view client all the way down to their desktop. So this is really information that even your network team can't provide you, right? Because they're looking at their core switches, they can measure latency between hops, but in the end, the ability to see PCRP latency is extremely critical, right? So if you have a user, working at home or on a bad Wi-Fi, or maybe they're at Starbucks and having a poor VDI experience, well, we can visualize that. In this one particular heat map, we would know if we had any users that had poor network connectivity between them and their desktop. And you would see it again, green is good, red is bad, and we're providing you that dynamic range. So from a PCRP perspective, we like to keep it under 250 milliseconds. I mean, that's really the highest point that you ever really want to see a usable PCRP session. After that, it's still usable, but they're going to start complaining things about, Windows dragging slow across the monitor, or just overall sluggishness and interactiveness of the experience, right? Keyboard strokes coming up and being delayed. Those are very common things associated with poor PCRP latency, or very high latency. So, so again, green is good. My session's looking at about 99 milliseconds, and it's performing just fine for me. Now we're showing other things other than latency, so we're also showing here things like packet loss. So packet loss is another great metric to look at to determine, hey, do we have network quality of service issues? Not just, did the packets get there from a switching perspective, right? So you can go to your network team, say, hey, I'm seeing PCRP packet loss, right? And what they'll typically tell you is that, okay, well, I'm looking at my switches and all the packets are delivered. We see 0% packet loss. Well, the challenge there is that PCRP is a UDP-based protocol, right? It will drop packets if the packets took too long to get there or they arrived out of order. Basically, at that point, because this is a visual protocol, they're unusable. So PCRP will just drop them because it's already moved on. It's waiting for the next packets to come in and to process them. So this can actually give you insight that your networking team doesn't have access to. And we've actually leveraged this dashboard and even this particular heat map to help a number of customers find pretty large issues in the environment, whether it was infrastructure related. I've plugged this into some sites. Some customers would see their entire data stores glowing bright red. Some sites you put it in and all their servers are glowing bright red. I've seen where CPU ready time and contention was 15, 20%, more than double of what we recommend. And it was obviously having a significant impact on their users' perspective of their desktop performance. PCRP, same thing here as well. Using really just latency and packet loss, we've helped customers find issues in their networking architecture environment because they were able to visualize the packet loss between the user's client and the virtual machine. Otherwise, they really had no clue that these things were going on. And so what's very nice about this type of tool is this gives you, a VDI admin, the information you need to go to a networking team and say, look guys, here it is visually. Here's a chart. Here's my PCRP latency. So I can pick my session. And again, my session doesn't necessarily have a problem, but I can click on the relationship. I can see, and this is actually extremely useful, I can see my desktop session. Is there any problem in my desktop session? Well, it's seeing a screen, so it doesn't look like there is one. But I see that my virtual machine is underperforming, right? So again, it's linked me with the idea of a session with the idea of a virtual machine. Now I can also see the connection server of my own. Well, does that connection server have issues? Well, it looks like it may have some issues because it's orange. It's not pretty green the way that we expect it to be. And I can also see that I'm coming in through a security server. Well, that arms me as an admin with more information. I know that I'm coming from the outside. Right? I'm coming from an outside network. Now I don't know what network I'm coming from per se, but I can see it's not our network. It's outside our domain. And then I can start to ask smarter questions like, well, is your latency high? Where are you? Are you on your typical home network? Are you on a 4G connection? Where are you coming from? And that can provide me with the information I need to determine, why is their overall quality of service or network slow? All right. So again, just a quick summary of this end user experience dashboard. We've kind of helped you guys see how we can visually show you performance problems throughout the environment impacting user experience, CPU, disk related, PCRP related, and even virtual machine capacity related. We have visibility, all those things. We're also actively tracking these exact same metrics as alerts, right? So as users log into these problem desktops, and if that problem exists over time, it'll start to bubble up as an alert as well. So you'll see it from both perspectives. And we can also quickly show you like how many alerts you have across all your pools, right? And again, just kind of show you from an environmental perspective, right? This might actually relate to something. A Mayor Win7 pool might relate to some very specific infrastructure, right? So if I have some pools getting impacted versus others, again, it's just trying to help you guys understand where most of the problems are coming from. All right. All right, now I want to transition to the Horizon Help Desk dashboard and really walk you guys through how to understand troubleshooting an individual user session, right? Because we've all gotten this call, right? Users are having a problem. Maybe we weren't doing proactive monitoring, or maybe we were, but doesn't matter. This user is calling in, they're complaining, their desktop's slow, but they are just completely unable to provide us a clue as to why. To them, right, they don't necessarily know their desktop's slow because of their connectivity. They don't understand it might be slow because they're demanding too many resources from the environment, and maybe the environment's not adequately performing it. All they know is, they're in their desktop session and it's not performing the way they expect it to. So this is really where the Horizon Help Desk dashboard came from, right? It really looks to help you guys solve a couple problems. One of them is, so we have the ability to search on users that are logged into current sessions, right? So we can search on users, find their desktop session, see the top level alerts, and quickly get an answer into why their desktop is slow. So to kind of let you know what we're going to be doing, I've actually tried to set the stage here. So let me see if I can bring up my desktop client here. So basically, I've had this desktop running for some time. It's basically running many YouTube tabs, all trying to watch some type of car video, right? And I log in and I see, oh, well, Google Chrome is unresponsive, relaunch now. If I want to, I can even, look at the task manager just to kind of see, well, what kind of performance problems this user might be having from the Windows perspective. And we can see that I'm basically maxing out CPU, and physical memory is extremely high. All of these things are going on right now. And if I were to try to use this desktop, I mean, obviously, being an admin, I would know, well, there's my problem, right? Just close Chrome or log off and log back in and get a brand new desktop, solve all my problems. But our users aren't necessarily that smart. They don't necessarily know you can't open 45 tabs in a browser and not consume all your memory. Those are not the type of things that we can expect them to know. What we can do is we can see when these types of problems are happening and then give you the ability to know, well, you know what, you just need to close out of Chrome, or you need to do X, Y, Z to resolve the issue. And maybe it might be simply be log off, log back in, right? That's the beauty of the non-persistent desktop model. But let's go back to the Horizon Help Desk dashboard. And what I'm going to do is actually search on my user session. So in this particular case, we're in the BMW demo environment. I'll put in my Active Directory ID. I'll find my VDI desktop session, and that's this AmeriWin 7 option, and I will select it. Now, a couple of things are going on here, so I'll just kind of walk you through quickly what we're seeing from an information perspective. Now, in this particular window, I can see my user ID, right? So that helps me confirm I have the right user. I can see the name of the desktop I'm logged into, right? That could be valuable information. Also know what version of the agent I'm currently running in that desktop, right? That might let me as the admin know, well, maybe for some reason they don't have an updated agent, right? It's useful information. But I also see the number of alerts impacting my session. So in this case, we have critical, warning, and immediate alerts. And they're ranged from 0, 1, and 2. So I can already tell just in this one box, that's a lot of information knowing that there are alerts going on my user session. Now, what are those alerts? Well, in this case, I have virtual machine has high unexpected CPU workload, right? So currently, that's the only major critical alert that's impacting my user experience at the moment. So okay, let's take a look and dig a little bit further into the other environmental information I get. Now, the way the rest of this dashboard works is what we wanted to do is to make it so our customers are presented with the information that they need to know, or the metrics they need to monitor, right? And we also wanted to show them without you having to go look for them, right? So this dashboard is designed so that we're really providing you all the key metrics you need to look at around my desktop environment to determine quickly what's going on and what do I need to pay attention to. And we do it using these scoreboards. And these scoreboard widgets basically allow us to color code each metrics depending on the level of the impact. So as a metric gets into an offensive range, or a range that we think is at least abnormal, we will change the color of these scoreboards. So in this case, my PCRP round trip latency, it's 88 milliseconds. We consider that in the green, nothing wrong with that from a performance perspective, so it stays green. However, notice how my PC over IP transmission bandwidth seems abnormally high. It's almost 2.2 megabits per second. That is a lot of bandwidth coming out of a VDI session, so I'm showing it as bright red. Now, it doesn't mean that I'm having a performance issue, right? Because performance issue would be related to latency, but it could be an impact or an indicator that, hey, something's going on. This user is driving a lot of bandwidth from their VDI session, and it could be contributing to their overall problem. All right, so for right now, that's just informational that we'll keep. But also look at my session workload. So according to this tool, we are basically maxing out some level of performance throughout our environment, right? And this is actually coming out of what we call the VDI session metric, or things related to PCRP performance. And again, that's going to be around bandwidth, latency, and packet loss. I mean, those are really the key metrics that we care about in a user's desktop session. Now, in addition to that, we're also showing you, right alongside the session metrics, the VM metrics that we care about. Now, again, we can already see the alert, virtual machine has high unexpected CPU workload. We've already seen that, right? That's happening, right? We already know it happens. But this allows me to confirm it. So here, we're actually looking at my virtual machine, and we're looking at actually looking at the overall workload. So my workload is actually starting to demand more than my virtual machine has the ability to support. And in fact, we're confirming that right here. So virtual machine has high unexpected CPU workload. Well, if I go right here, boom, yes it is. It's at 91%. Well, Again, that's not exactly a real-time number, right? That number is only polled every 5 minutes or so. But the last time it did poll it, it was still cooking at 90%. So this user, me, is driving a really high CPU workload, and that more than likely is going to impact my ability to use my desktop. Now, this is not necessarily alert that we typically trigger off on from an environmental perspective, right? Because, so me as a user, right, if I max out my CPU, I don't necessarily care in certain cases, right? Meaning, if I went out, and I like to use this example, and I bought a laptop, and that laptop had, 4 physical cores in it. Well, if I consumed all those cores, IT is not going to give me a new laptop because I can't stay within my CPU boundaries, right? The laptop has resource constraints, it has memory constraints, it has CPU constraints. And IT or the business is not necessarily going to give me more resources just because I can't stay with them, unless there's a real business reason to do so. However, from a help desk perspective, if a user is calling in and telling me their desktop is slow and I can't see that they're at least driving high utilization across the board, then I won't necessarily know why they're complaining, right? So we can't always just look at latency metrics. So here we're looking at things like CPU ready time and contention. Well, those are really in the green value for the most part for this desktop environment. But we can visualize that, hey, the CPU is really high. So there must be something going on process related inside of Windows that's driving this utilization. The user's doing something, right? So this tells me, hey, infrastructure is fine. CPU ready is good. CPU contention, there's nothing going on with the host. I can stop worrying about that. In fact, I see, my virtual machine has 2 cores here, right? 2 virtual CPUs assigned to virtual machine. Well, how many are recommended for me at this time? Well, it's saying 2 virtual CPUs. So I have the amount of recommended virtual CPUs. Now, if I kept this up for all day, every day, this number might get bumped up, right? But for my individual session, I have what is recommended, right? I have what I need. Um, so that's not necessarily a concern. So really my concern from a troubleshooting perspective is figuring out, well, okay, well, what's driving this workload? User's doing something. Now, depending on my environment, I might not spend any time troubleshooting this. I might just say, you know what, log off, log back in. I don't care what you're doing. We'll just generate you a new non-persistent desktop. It'll spin up. It'll clear out all your settings, log you back in, and you'll be happy to go. Right? That might be your troubleshooting scenario. But in this case, we actually want to know what's going on. So we see things like other metrics that are impacting latency, such as disk latency. Well, okay, it's not exactly in the red yet, but it's definitely above best practice, right? Typically, we want to be right at the 15 millisecond range, and we're definitely above that. So it looks like this latency is not necessarily keeping up with the amount of IOPS I'm driving. And even my IOPS are high for a virtual machine session or a virtual desktop session. I'm driving 27 IOPS, right? And for most work environments, I'm expected to work on Word or Excel, which shouldn't really demand any I/O for all intents and purposes. So I'm doing a lot, right? I'm demanding a lot of I/O, a lot of CPU. It's driving up my VM workload. So something's going on that I need to pay attention to from a help desk perspective. Now we can still see other things like their session login breakdown time. So if it took me a really long time to log in, I would see that type of information. But really what I want to show you here is the ability to go get in-guest processes. So I have the ability to simply click on this widget. This is the session processes widget. And I'll click the run action. And what this will do is I'll actually go out and talk to my virtual machine. It'll say, hey, go do a perf mine dump, bring me the stats back, dump them in this window so I can confirm what's going on, right? I see from a vROPs perspective that I'm driving a lot of CPU, a lot of disk I/O, but what's causing it? So now that it's done that, right, it's pulled back the information that I need. So if I look here, I can see that, hey, Chrome is demanding 82% of my processor time, right? That is a lot. If I look at, working memory, it's driving the most amount of memory. If I look at disk I/O operations, it's definitely demanding the most disk read and write operations out of any other process going on. And also driving the most network packets being received and sent throughout the environment. So again, I was able to, within a matter of a click, let's walk you through that scenario again. So again, I called in, I'm a user, I had a problem, I searched on my name, I then clicked on my particular session that was having the issue, and I saw all of my environmental alerts. I see so high CPU workload, and in fact, since we've been on this particular help desk screen, we've also added in a new alert. Obviously, my disk performance has been going on for a long enough period of time that it's now impacted my overall session, and now I'm seeing that as a triggered alert. Hey, in addition to CPU problems, I'm also having disk problems, and then we just confirmed it, right? So again, within one click, search on the name, I have the answer from a learning perspective. But I also have the visual metrics that confirm that, right? I can see, yes, really high CPU, yes, really high disk I/O, yes, wow, disk latency is going way up. So it's no longer yellow. We are in the bright red scenario now. And you can also see that I just got a new performance warning alert on my disk latency as well. So disk performance degraded. And again, we just confirmed that the write latency is also related to an ingest process, right? So we looked at things like disk I/O, disk latency. We also looked at Chrome. We confirmed that Chrome was driving most of the workload, driving the processor time, driving the most memory, driving most disk I/O. Well, that basically concludes our demo portion of how to operationalize vRealize for Horizon. So just really to wrap up and recap what we walked everyone through today. We started off on the recommendations dashboard, right? This is the default dashboard that comes out of the box with vRealize operations for Horizon. We gave everyone a baseline understanding of what health, risk, and efficiency are. Right, we told you that health are really immediate things you need to look at and pay attention to right now. They could be workload related, they could be environmental configuration related, or other problems, performance related impacting your users. And we also talked about risk, right? Risk is more future looking, mostly related around capacity, right? So when am I going to run out of capacity of something? Is it near term? Has it already happened? But again, risk is future looking at capacity related issues. And then finally, efficiency. Where can I go optimize my environment? Where can I, reduce the amount of resources that we provision so that I can reclaim some of those resources? Or maybe where am I under provision, right? That might be another key element as well that you kind of take into consideration with risk and efficiency. So they really look at an entire score of how efficiently can I run my Horizon View environment. We also talked about alerts and how vRealize operations for Horizon gives us those proactive environmental problems that are impacting our users, right? So again, we have virtual machine disk performance degraded. We have virtual machine CPU performance degraded, and we see that very visually, and we see the size of the impact, right? We don't have, 21 individual disk performance alerts. It's one alert impacting 21 people, right? So it helps you to simplify the what we call information or alert overload, right? One simple view, but also see how big the problem really is impacting your users. We also looked at the end user experience dashboard, how it helps you to quickly visualize from a heat map perspective all of the performance or environmental concerns in your environment impacting your users. Things around CPU experience, CPU ready time, virtual disk latency, virtual disk performance. We can even look at virtual machine IOPS. All right, so which virtual machines are having the most latency because they're also driving the most IOPS. Right, we can change our context depending on what we're trying to see and what argument we're trying or problem we're trying to solve. And even PC over IP experience, right? That's extremely important when it comes to being able to monitor the overall quality of service or connections of your users all the way to their desktop. Very more important even when you have more remotely connected people versus internally connected people. We also saw the active session alerts, right? So the exact same alerts that are popping up here visually in the red, bright red, these are also impacting users. So as users log in and they're consuming these problem desktops, we see it visually, right? CPU performance degraded, high CPU utilization, right? All of these things are going on throughout the environment. And then finally, we walked you through the Horizon Help Desk dashboard and how you can leverage a dashboard like this to troubleshoot a more reactive scenario, right? Where users calling in and we need to determine very quickly why is their desktop slow? Why are they calling and complaining, right? We searched on my username, picked my session, found the alerts, and then confirmed all of the session related metrics. And at this point, we're going to, that sort of concludes again the wrap up session of today's conversation. What we want to do is kind of transition over to more live Q&A. But just to quickly put this up here, this is where you can go get more valuable information around vRealize operations for Horizon. We have an entire getting more out of VMware webinar portal, right? So simply go to the URL listed here in the presentation and see all of our previous demos that we've done and all of the other webinars we put on. You can also get more custom content. So I maintain my own blog site that you can go out to, and I put my latest custom content that I develop with my customers. I work a lot on this particular solution to create content. I try to get as much as I can in the product, but when I can't get it in the product, I also make it available on our website because I can certainly get it out there quickly. And then, of course, we also have hands-on labs. That's an extremely valuable resource for everyone on today's call. We highly recommend, if you haven't done so, go onto the labs at hol.vmware.com portal. There are lots of end-user computing labs. There's lots of specific vRealize operations labs that you can go learn more about this particular solution. But all of really our key products are up there on there. And these are basically tiny data centers, right? You go deploy a virtual data center, you can go consume the lab, we give you a guided manual, we teach you step by step how to consume these products. So it's really the best place to go learn how to consume VMware products. And if you want to go back and play, you can kind of use this area as a sandbox, right? You don't have to go through the lab. You can simply leverage the virtualized infrastructure and how it's configured and go test your own scenarios. And I will pause right here so we can turn it over to the live Q&A session.